Thanks a lot for staying with us. The United States is set to repatriate about $8.9 million in assets to Nigeria after a royal court in Jersey ruled that stolen assets worth this amount, that's $8.9 million, be returned. The order of the royal court in Jersey followed a forfeiture notice to the court by Jersey's Attorney General, Mark Temple, who said the government of Jersey was in close partnership with Nigeria on the repatriation of the funds. And he said part of the funds were shared with family members of politicians in the then ruling People's Democratic Party ahead of the 2015 general election. Joining us via Zoom now from Benin, the Edo State capital, is Executive Director, Africa Network for Environment and Economic Justice, David Ugolo. Thank you very much for joining us again. Good to see your face this new year. But let's quickly have your thoughts on yet another development, of Nigeria's stolen assets. Thankfully, the U.S. court has agreed that these millions of dollars be repatriated to Nigeria. But what are your thoughts, basically, on this news?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. I think this is a good news. It's a welcome development. It's again coming against the background after the UN COPS meeting in Atlanta, which was just concluded last month. For me, this is good news, particularly for Nigeria, with the challenges we're facing with public finance in the country, and also again put to bear how key government officials, politicians, can use fraudulent companies to siphon public money for their private use. Again, it shows clearly that asset recovery is working, cooperations among nations is working, and particularly when you see this particular case where $8.9 million, which is about 8.2 billion naira, will be returned back to Nigeria. The countries that were involved, Jersey, South Africa, Nigerian government. So congratulations to the Anti-Corruption Agency, the Financial Intelligence Agency, who has worked in a complex case to unpack this huge grand corruption involving government officials. And for me, it's a welcome development. But the other interesting aspect of it is that this has become an ongoing process where Nigeria is recovering money stolen from the public treasury, or in the name of fighting Boko Haram and buying arms for Nigerian government. And so using those complex procurement processes to siphon government of money. Now, what is not very interesting in all this investigation is the disclosure of the identity of the Nigerian officials that are involved. This is not the first time. This is not the second time, this is not the third time. It has become a recurring decimal. That each time whistle is blown or money is recovered, but the people, the actors who are involved in these shady deals are not disclosed. This for me is something that we are going to take up internationally. Because there's no way you will not encourage impunity if you continue to keep away from the public those actors that are involved. So it means that it's the same actors. In the past 15, 20 years in Nigeria, all the recovery we have secured so far, apart from Abacha, who is dead, and his children and wife, there's no other name that is yet to be disclosed. And this is 8.2 billion naira traced to private accounts. And these individuals, these companies, Nigerian government cannot claim ignorance. Glencoe, few months last year, also disclosed how they share dollars among officials of NNPC. To date, we have not got any information from EFCC, we have not got any information from ICPC, we have not got any information from the Nigerian government as to who are those NNPC officials. This is a very shoddy way of doing things. There is no way you will end corruption, because what it means is that crime pays. All you need to do is not to steal bicycle, not to steal small things. Steal big money, and your name will not be disclosed. So this is a big challenge for President Tinubu's government. And he has to put in place something that will help Nigeria to identify those who are involved in this kind of grand corruption. It's only when you disclose the identity of those who are involved that you can put a stop to this kind of things happening. Glencoe case just happened last year, and the officials were all went to NNPC, who received this money from Glencoe, an oil company, commodity company. And up to this point today, nothing happened. Ali Botin, the same thing. So this kind of situation where a foreign company will come to Nigeria, distribute money, compromise government official, compromise the rule of law and everything. And then when the money is traced to different bank accounts, overseas, offshores, then the identity of the government officials are not disclosed. They continue to operate.
Dr. Ogolo.
Really, yes.
So I'm wondering, because over the years, so for some years back, there was this advocacy for naming and shaming those behind terrorism, those behind pilfering our public funds, etc. Yes. Exactly what reason would you adduce to the fact that these people are not named and they are not shamed? Is there a way we can apply public pressure to the government to ensure that these people are named and shamed? Or is there any other reason for them not to have been named?
Well, this is just playing the devil's role. It's possible that during the investigation processes, part of the deal reached like something like plea bargain, that our identity will not be disclosed, we will own up. And so when that kind of an agreement is reached, you see that even from the document released from the foreign jurisdictions, the identities of those who were involved in these bribery processes are taken out of the document. So it becomes difficult for the media to know the identity. But the Nigerian government can do something. And as a matter of fact, like you rightly noted, this is going to become a global campaign for us. We're going to target, like for example, Jesse, for example, they have a moral responsibility beyond the legal aspect to ensure that the global financial system is cleaner. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we are all affected. If money meant for the poor people of Nigeria to tackle the issue of Boko Haram, to provide amenities for the people, to create a good aviation infrastructure in Nigeria, are stolen, it will again affect the global common good. You can see the impact of Boko Haram in Nigeria. It has created conflict. It has become impossible to push development in the northeast part of the country. Millions of young people, women are raped every day because of this atrocity. So it's in our interest to begin to see how terrorist financing is operating in Nigeria. And you cannot see that there is a linkage between a very high government officials. And this, if you look when this happened, was between 2009 to 2014 and 15. And it was targeted around the election period. So when you have government officials with such a bogus amount of money, it can easily compromise the election. So the danger of all this is that, and the international community must understand this, is that they have to know that the corruption, the grand corruption that is going on in Nigeria, not only affects Nigeria alone, it affects the international community. So it is in the interest of the international community to begin to work with Nigerians, with civil society, so that we can end this culture of impunity where those that are involved in looting of this kind of fund are not disclosed. The identity of these people have to be disclosed. If you don't name and shame them, then there will be an incentive for others to continue. And that's exactly what has happened. You can just see this now. It happened just last year. Glencoe also distributed across 8 countries in Africa, including Nigeria. And the money was received by NNPC officials. The names of those people were not disclosed. And when Nigerian government made an attempt to go to the court to file him as a victim of that case, their case were thrown out because those who seek equity must, those who seek justice must come with clear hands. And so Nigerian government must first put their house in order. The people that are stealing this money, cooperating with foreign jurisdictions, using foreign offshore shell company, they are not foreigners, they are Nigerians. In the case of Glencoe, they are officials of NNPC. It's there in the document, in the statement of fact. Then in this case now, in this $8.9 million, which is about 8.2 billion naira, you could imagine what would help us to achieve in our annual budget that has now been traced to private banks and private companies of politicians and top civil servants. So you can see that there's no way you can have free and fair election in Nigeria when individuals control this kind of bogus amount of money. They can easily use it to compromise the system. So that's why Nigerians, we must rise up to say enough is enough.
All right. In addition to this, in addition to the point you are making, I also want you to respond to another twist in this latest news. The U.S. prosecutor has said, and so following the announcement or the order granted by the court, it will now, he says that the government will now begin a round of negotiations on how these monies can be repatriated. And this will not be the first time that we'll be getting this narrative from the international community where these state funds are stashed, talking about conditional repatriation of this funds, Nigeria's Commonwealth. I wonder how this stance by the international community sits with you, because if their money was stashed in our own, bank account, it wouldn't be the same. First off, they would have even long before now, worked on how they would get the money on no terms, on no conditions at all, brought by the Nigerian government.
No, again, I speak from point of knowledge, and the issue of condition do not want to arise in this case. If you recall, Nigeria have had a very bad history of repatriation until the repatriation of the Abacha through the $3.2.5 million, when the Swiss government court ruled that there should be kind of a framework of transparency and accountability. Prior before then, over $600 to $700 million that was returned to Nigeria was misused. So you also understand that there's a political interest around this repatriation thing. Some people in those countries, those jurisdictions where this money is stashed in, do not even believe that they should even return the money, because in the first place, they don't trust our financial system. They don't trust our system, because if it is returned, it's going to be stolen again. So they want to put in place a safeguard. And some of us that has been working on asset restitution in the country also understand this very well. I haven't participated in monitoring this process since in the 90s. We have discovered that some buildings and some rules government claim that they use the money to build, we can't find them, we can't locate them until the Abacha through the $322.5 million, which was put into cash transfer program. And if you look what has happened in the last few weeks, how money meant for poor people in the country has been mismanaged, shared among ministers and civil servants across the country, it doesn't send a good signal. It doesn't send a good signal for those who are working day and night for money to be returned back to the country. You can see now that a minister, how he distributed them 3 billion, all in an attempt to just reorganize the social register. So when you hear this kind of news internationally, I'm sure that you also agree that those people, they are human beings. They can't trust such a system. So because of that, there is a system put in place, principles, which Nigerian government also acceded to. And that after the London Anti-Corruption Conference in London, the US and the UK government came together to organize a follow-up meeting they called the Global Forum on Asset Recovery in Washington in 2017. Nigerian government and other 3 other countries participated. At the end of the meeting, there were set principles. There are about 10 principles that they agreed on to guide the restitution of assets, dispositions of assets, how when asset is identified, it should be returned back to the country. And that complements the UN Global Anti-Corruption Treaty, which is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC. UNCAC is the global anti-corruption framework that guides different jurisdictions on how they go about cooperating in restitution assets. There are articles, particularly Chapter 5 of that convention, that deals squarely on the issue of asset restitution. It guides countries on how they will act. So when you take that Global Forum on Asset Recovery principle, Principle 10 talks about the inclusion of civil society in the monitoring. And there are other principle that talks about transparency, accountability, the exclusions of those who perpetrate the crime not to benefit from the restitution. Putting those principles in practice is part of the thing they are talking about, how we are going to negotiate the restitution. And that principle has been put in practice in some of the restitution that has taken place in the last 2-3 years. And it has worked for Nigeria. Today, Nigeria is one of the poster child of success story, how assets should be returned. We just came back from Atlanta and we presented the mantra report. The mantra is civil society actions around the restitution, how we monitor the process independently. It didn't cost us all these millions of dollars you are hearing from humanitarian affairs for monitoring. We'll use little money to do that monitoring. And to a large extent, we will not claim perfection, but at least the cash transfer program worked well in Nigeria. And at least most of the money, as agreed on in the agreement with the Swiss government, went to the beneficiaries across the country. And if there were grievances, there were some level of corruption, we use the grievances mechanism to seek redress and resolve some of those issues. ICPC went to investigate, officials caught in shady deals were dismissed. So what am I trying to say is that there is no conditionality in this. What Jersey government is saying in the negotiation, and we are also going to write to Jersey government, we will not want the $8.2 billion to be sent to Nigeria and put in the Nigerian budget, and nobody know what it's used for.
That's right.
Because it doesn't make sense.
That's right.
President Tinubu government has to come up with a strategy. As we speak now, we don't have any anti-corruption strategy. President Tinubu has come into power, is going to have many months now. Tinubu need to announce to the world that this is my strategy, and this is what I will be doing with restituted asset. It will send confidence to other countries. That is absent totally. So nobody will just pick the $8.2 billion and then throw it to Tinubu's government. No, Tinubu government has to see that. And I'm happy that they have set up an investigation team under the leadership of the finance minister, which we, the civil society, are going to engage. The experience from what has happened.
So let me quickly come in. You already answered the question I wanted to ask as about the the strategy the government is putting in place to ensure that pilfering of public funds is not a recurrent thing to do. But then, how do you think the global community itself can also contribute to preventing similar instances of corruption and embezzlement in our system? Because we only get this money back, about $3.65 billion US, repatriated from Abacha loot, during the Buhari administration. But then I'm not sure whether we got the interest. So how does the global community play the role?
The interest was $13 million.
Calculated, right?
Yes.
So what role do you think the global community can play in ensuring that this does not recur again?
Well, the first thing is that, like I said, we just came back from the UNCAC thing. UNCAC is the COPS meeting, the Conference of State Party for the United Nations Conference on Against Corruption. And, at that meeting, there were quite a number of resolutions, even Nigerian-sponsored resolutions around beneficial ownership and asset recovery. What they're trying to look is that, like the companies that were used to siphon some of this money out of the country, ownership, if you know the owners, you can easily trace it. And if you look what has also happened during the humanitarian affairs scandal, some of the companies were traced to some of the ministers in Tinubu's government. The reason why that happened is that we don't know the owners. So the Nigerian government have now designed a beneficial ownership register, which means that every company that operates in Nigeria, you will be able to know who are the owners. And in that process, issue of conflict of interest can easily be identified. And so one of the things that the international community is putting in place now, both US, UK government, is getting a register of beneficial owner so that we know who are the owners of the company. They are trying to also clean up the offshore system, where the global financial system, there's transparency, there's accountability. There's a global move towards that direction, or in an attempt to clean up the global financial system to make it almost impossible for illicit financial flow to move around. There's another thing that they're also putting in place in UK and US is an unexplained wealth order. The unexplained wealth order is a framework that you cannot just easily come up and say, I'm a multi-billionaire now. You have to explain. So the EFCC or the ICPC should be able to use that law to hold any government officials accountable. And the individuals can blow whistle on individuals that will just have buildings or material things that they cannot easily escape.
Okay.
So those are some of the things that is ongoing globally.
All right, but let me quickly push this last question because we have indeed run out of time. A section of civil society believes that this repatriation will not go down without a fight because New Jersey or the Jersey government will claim that it is entitled to a portion of it. The U.S. or whichever other country that had a role in recovery too would also request a portion of it. I wonder where you stand and kindly give us, your brief response so we can round up.
People speak about this whole thing. They are not very conversant about the rules. It's very clear. It costs those countries to investigate, to identify resources, to be able to identify those resources wherever they are located. And then in the international treaty, there is a framework to compensate those actions. So it's not a wrong thing. There are percentages that will go for the country where this money was located. There's nothing wrong. It's a good practice. Otherwise, you will not see, those countries will not be incentivized to give you the support. Left alone with Nigerian government, they will not be able to trace this money, I can tell you. All the money recovered so far, returned back to Nigeria so far, is as a result of the cooperation of the international community. So who pays for those jobs? Who pays for those actions? So that's why the global legal framework around asset restitutions favors that practice. So there's nothing wrong. The only thing we are saying, the percentage should not be too homogous.
Right.
And basically, it should be in a kind of consideration. So we are all working towards a good practice. And I'm sure that the role that Jersey government has played so far, to a large extent, is a welcome development. And we as civil society, we have been engaging the Jersey government. We will continue to engage the Jersey government. We're also going to engage the Tinubu's government.
All right.
It is not just business of the Tinubu's government alone. The government must create an enabling environment for civil society to engage so that ministers who are asked to take responsibility on behalf of the president don't go and create their own company, create their own system.
That's right.
All right. The money.
Reverend Ugolo, a fine place to rest our conversation. We're already hitting the top of the hour. David Ugolo, the Executive Director of Africa Network for Environment and Economic Justice. Thanks for your insights, and we hope for a more active role for the civil society in this new year regarding all these very crucial mandates before us.